Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This week is going to be episode 29, and we're actually going to be sitting down with Gavin J. Konop, the writer and director of Spider-Man Lotus. This movie has been long awaited for a lot of Spider-Man fans. It looks fantastic for a fan film. It definitely puts a run for the money for some of the actual studio people and what they've been doing. So we get to sit down with Gavin. We get to talk to him about the movie. We're also going to address some of the controversies that existed in the past because some people still seem to think that it's their opinions of what may or may not have happened in their mind are the actual truth of what happened. So we want to talk about that, just get it out of the way, clear the air a bit, and then we're going to talk about the one character that all three of us love, and that is Spider-Man. So we're going to get right into it, and here we go. All right. Well, Gavin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
I think Michael's still muted. I'm going to mute you. There you go. So we were talking before the show. I've actually been following this project for a long while. I definitely, the first time I saw the project, I was like, okay, cool. Fan films are fantastic. Sometimes they're knock them out of the park. Sometimes they are standard fan films. And then I saw some videos of you guys posting those behind the scenes pics of the costume and the casting and everything you were doing with it. And then what really caught my eye was the parallels and the inspiration you took from Spider-Man Blue, which is my absolute favorite Spider-Man book. And then I'm like, all right, now I'm really interested. Then came the trailers, then came the snippets of VFX footage, and I was just completely blown away by how well you guys put this thing together.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for being here with us. It's a really cool project, and from my understanding, this week you're going to be announcing the release date, and I know a lot of fans are haranguing you on social media about that release date, and it's finally going to be revealed this week. So that's pretty exciting. But
for
everyone who doesn't know about the project,
right. Well, some of us are just finding out about this project, and that's an amazing thing. So now we're getting to a release date. When did you start kicking this idea around in your mind? Because this is, even though the world is about to see it, this has been living inside of your brain for a very long time. When did all of those wheels start turning?
Well, I started writing the movie in January 2020, but I always like to say it's been a lifetime in the making, because I've been such a massive fan of Spider-Man my entire life. I can't remember a time where Spider-Man wasn't at the forefront of, my entire life growing up. But the movie I started writing in January 2020. So it's been about 3.5 years now of, a whole lot of stuff. I've grown so much. I've gone from a little kid to almost an adult now. And it's just been a crazy process, and I've learned so much, and it's been the journey of a lifetime.
Of all of those years, what was the most difficult? What was the longest slog? What was the most difficult part to get moving?
It was definitely, I would have to, obviously 2022, the middle half of it up to the beginning of 2023. There was just a lot of uncertainty for me in terms of where it was going to go, what I was going to be doing with it. It was just incredibly difficult, and there were so many moving pieces, and I was trying to keep my own mental state in order and trying to navigate through my own life, because it was just a really unprecedented time. And, none of the other years of working on the movie could have prepared me for that. And they don't even compare. But you know what, we made it through that time. And 2023 has been a very productive year with the movie. We've made a lot of progress. The movie's been made better than it ever was before. And I'm just so proud of it now, finally seeing a final product coming into fruition. And it's insane to see. I never anticipated that it would become what it is now.
There is a momentum that gathers with these things, and I am so happy to hear that momentum is gathering. Spider-Man has been such a big modern hero that there's now multiple decades of people. What was your first introduction to it? Was it comic books? Was it the cartoon? Was it a video game?
It was the first Raimi Spider-Man. So this isn't a story that I remember. It's a story my mom tells me. I must have been 1 or 2 years old. She said she was flipping through the TV and Spider-Man was on, and she was going to change the channel, but young little me was captivated by whatever was on screen, whether it was the red and blue suit and the vibrant colors and the action. Something captivated me, and she said from that day forward, there's just been it's been Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Spider-Man. You know, nothing has in my life has been more important than that. And so it was the Raimi movies, and I owe a lot to those movies. You know, they really created my love for the character, my understanding of it. Yeah, they were the most influential in terms of, you know, what media I consumed of the character growing up.
You are the writer director of it. Have you been, you know, you've watched so much of it. This film meant so much to you. Do you think that there are any Raimi-isms in the way that you shoot things or the way that you frame shots? Because that first Spider-Man movie, there's a little bit of CG, but a lot of that stuff, it's in camera and it's weird poses and stuff, but it's like it would be in a comic book frame.
Yeah. I think there were subconscious influences, but my biggest thing was trying to make a movie based on the comic books as if other media hadn't been created yet. So it was kind of like try to tell a Spider-Man story that felt contained, that felt like a pure adaptation of the classic comic books, and trying to not let other media influence me too much so it could feel like a fresh take on the character. But I think just because of the fact that I grew up with it and I watched it so frequently and I recited the lines and I acted it out all the time, it had to have been subconsciously driving me. But I did try to kind of tell my own story and find my own style with it.
You are branching out into your own Spider-Man world, which is amazing because you're putting your own stamp on it. Did you resonate with the Andrew Garfield ones? Did you enjoy those ones? Do you like what they're doing with Tom Holland? I mean, at a certain point, it doesn't matter if we like it or not. That's what they're doing, except I feel like I feel like they've reached a fun plateau with the Tom Holland Spider-Man that maybe he might start doing what we expect Spider-Man to start doing. It just took a long way to get there, so I don't know. But what are the different eras? Where are your opinions on those films?
Yeah, the Andrew Garfield movies, for a while when I was maybe in 3rd grade up to 5th grade, they were much more important to me than the Raimi movies for a very small amount of time. Those movies I was obsessed with them. I tried to recreate TASM 2, the Amazing Spider movies. I was obsessed with them. And then when I got to high school, you know, the Tom Holland movies I loved, you know, whatever adaptation came along. And then there came a stage where I was very outspoken about my opinions on the character. And I was very protective of how the character was portrayed and what they did with the character. And, you know, being a kid with some level of platform, I look back and I was incredibly annoying and, you know, came off pretentious a lot. You know, some 15-year-old thinks he knows what he's talking about. But, you know, I've come to a point now where I have such a respect for every adaptation of the character now, you know, even though I disagree with certain approaches and I wish certain things were done differently, but I've come to a point where I can really, really respect an adaptation of the character that takes the core of him, does something different, tries something fresh, and still the whole point of doing this is so you can appeal to people and so you can reach people's souls and inspire them. And I don't think there's ever been a Spider-Man movie that hasn't inspired somebody in some way. And they've all been effective to the audience in some way. And I'm so grateful that the character's been able to do that. And so regardless of whatever my personal interpretation of the character might be, I'm very grateful for all the different things that we've gotten for him.
You're giving very grown-up answers. And I don't mean that as like, I feel like you're pandering at all. I think that there is something you have to realize. It is so difficult to get a project off the ground, to fund it and to make it happen. And you have made a project. Yeah. So I just saw the new terrible Indiana Jones movie, and so many people worked so hard on that movie, and I know what a big deal it was to them. And regardless of me not liking it or wishing they would have done things differently, because you could have done so much differently, it's all right in front of you. Just move the pieces a little bit.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and there's always going to be things that we like more and things that we don't like more.
And I think, or not to cut you off, but I think actually going out there and making a movie taught me a lot about being respectful when talking about pieces of art, because, you know, before making the movie, I'd never done this before. So obviously I could very easily say this movie sucks, this movie's good. But then you go out and you make your own project and you endure the obstacles you face, you endure the hardships and how difficult it is to tell a proper story about a character of this scale. And so you really do learn a level of empathy that you really wouldn't have unless you go out and do it.
I mean, it's literally walk a mile in another man's shoes. It's just the most expensive shoes. It's so difficult to do, especially if you're trying to get it to be at any level, you know, what Taylor had said about fan films. There's this weird line and stuff like that. And we live in a world where we do want our art to be at that higher level, but there's such an execution of it. And I'm happy to hear that you are getting to that spot. What things then, regardless of the things that we dislike, what are some aspects of the Spider-Man character you feel that hasn't been explored on the big screen yet? Because there's lots of them, but what's one to you that you're like, we should be doing this?
I always talk about the fact that I think this is always explored with the character, but not to the extent that I tried to explore it, was how imperfect he is and how he can sometimes be unheroic. You know, Peter Parker is a real human being, and I often describe it like Superman versus Peter Parker. You know, Superman is the guy that you look up to, you want to be like, you know, he inspires you to be a better person. Peter Parker is who we all already are. You know, we are in those shoes. We see him struggle. We see him give up. We see him sometimes choose the selfish route. But at the end of the day, he will always eventually choose to do the right thing, and his actions will speak louder than what he says. You know, sometimes he'll say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to give up. You know, this isn't my responsibility. But at the end of the day, he will choose the right thing. And I think that's so endearing about the character. And so I wanted to give him moments in this movie where you really do see a side of him where he's making mistakes and you as the audience disagree with him, and you don't, you're in your head, you're really wanting him to go a different direction. You don't want him to do this, but he's doing it and he's making this mistake. And then at the end of the day, learning from that mistake, growing from it, becoming a better person. That's what ties into the Lotus title of, we make mistakes, we encounter tragedy, we do the wrong thing, and, you know, we experience hardship, but at the end of the day, we can grow into something beautiful because of those mistakes that we've made and because of what we've endured. And so that was my big approach to the character that has been explored before, but I tried to make it the central core of the entire narrative.
Where do you put Goku between your superhero and Spider-Man? Where does Goku fall in your triangle of hierarchy of superheroes we want to be?
I don't know a whole lot about Goku. I want to get into it at some point, but I can't comment on it yet.
Okay. I appreciate that.
A good diplomatic answer. So I wanted to bring up something real fast. So this film on Indiegogo started off with a reasonable goal. You said, I want to make it this much money, this much what we need. And over the course of your campaign, it raised over $112,000 in support for this. Dozens and dozens of backing updates, promises of posters, physical copies, things like that, all these fantastic things. And then it seemed almost in this weird turn of events. Everything was done. Everything was great. The film was being shot. And then unfortunately, a controversy came out where Ewan Warden, the star of the movie who plays Peter Parker Spider-Man, some text messages were leaked. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, these guys are racist. This can't be my Spider-Man. This guy's a racist. And memes came out. Things got blown out of proportion. And I saw what they were. And I saw your apologies. And I saw everything that you did. And the way I've always seen it was the person that me and Michael are when we were teenagers, we were horrendous. And thank God for social media not existing at that point. But social media has made lives harder. And the people that we are when we make jokes and we say things in jest, that's a real thing. And people tend to forget that. So I understand that I saw your apology. I saw everything that you went through, and I wanted to know what you thought of it in hindsight. What was the overall, like, everyone branding you and Warden a racist for like a good solid few months? Everyone's saying, "Oh, the film's canceled because the racist made it," and then coming through it and clearly not letting it take you down. What's that whole been like?
Yeah, I think there's a certain level of value to the internet being able to put a magnifying glass on people. You know, there's a good side and there's a bad side. It's a double-edged sword, because there are a lot of people who, for the past however long duration of time, have gotten away with things that they should not have gotten away with. And so there is a benefit to the fact that now we're in a time where people can be held to their mistakes, people can be held accountable for it. And that's what I advocate for. I advocate for, somebody makes a mistake, you call them out on it, they change for the better, and they move forward with their lives. I think that's a beneficial thing. The problem is when it's turned into a spectacle, and when it becomes beyond accountability, and it becomes kind of, again, turning something into a spectacle, and it doesn't become about the actual problem. I think, the problem, it is a fundamental problem that people in their youth are able to throw around whatever they want and say hurtful things and get away with it. And it's good to hold them accountable. But what happened with my situation was fake things were made, scenes were leaked online, people were disrespecting, coming after the cast and crew who had nothing to do with it. I am okay with receiving hate for anything I said and did. Warden is okay with receiving hate for anything he said and did, because there are actions, and you get consequences for your actions, and I've accepted that. That's a thing that you live with. But it becomes a problem when people are pulled into it who they're innocent, they had nothing to do with it, they were not aware of it, and social media turned it into this event. It was turned into something for people to point and laugh at, and it was very extrapolated, and it got to a point I didn't even know how to respond, because I said this, I didn't say that, I said this, I didn't say that, and it became difficult to navigate that, because if you start to say didn't say that, it looks like you're making excuses. If you say, well, I did say that, it gets so muddled, and it just blew up beyond the bubble that it should have stayed in. And also, it's worth noting that this was many, many years ago. It wasn't like we said it yesterday. We had said it 14, 15 years old, and I think anybody sort of, as you navigate through high school and you grow up, you take a look in the mirror and you reflect and you decide that you're not going to say certain immature jokes anymore. So I didn't find there to be a lot of substance to the controversy, because of the fact that we had already grown and moved forward from it. It was a part of our lives that we'd left behind. If that makes sense.
I feel what you're going through, because it is a very difficult thing. And I just want to repeat what Taylor said. There isn't a digital record of all the fucked up stuff we said. And I can't believe, I don't know what that would be like to deal with that. You are a different person. You have educated yourself in your life. You know what I mean? Like all of these things. What a thing. Does it make you hate the internet? Because it's this weird thing. It helped bring this project to fruition, but it also was so easy to judge based on nothing, based on this picture I see. So it's like, oh, great. Well, I can burn you down because God forbid you have any success. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say I hate the internet or anything like that as a result of it, because at the end of the day, they don't know who I am. I haven't spoken to them. They haven't spoken to me. So, when you see those messages, you're going to make a judgment and you're going to assume something about me. And no matter what I do or say, I can never prove that I'm this way or that way. They're observing me from afar. They're not in my life. They don't know what I do in my day-to-day life. So I understand the anger. I understand the backlash, and I always have. What I disagree with is the extrapolation of it, the rumors, misinformation. That's what I disagree with. But the controversy itself, if it were to stay contained, I understand it. And, my opinion on that hasn't even changed before the controversy. I've always said that, like, if somebody, makes a mistake, you hold them to it. You hold them. You have consequences for your actions, like I said. And that's something I've accepted, and now that I've forgiven myself and I've grown from it. But I took a year to do that. It took a long time for me to, you know, say, okay, I'm ready to move on now. I'm ready to leave this behind. But it took a while, and I'm okay that it happened, and I'm grateful for the growth that it's given me, and I feel much more mature and fulfilled than I did before.
I mean, Michael and I, we
It's
grew up in Southern California. Go ahead, Michael. Yep.
no. I don't want our silence to shocked or that we don't have a response. I'm glad to hear that you have evolved and learned from it, and you know what I mean. And your actions are going to speak louder than words. And I hope that this doesn't. And I'm glad that it hasn't dissuaded you from making more art, because we're talking about Spider-Man, but I'd love to know who your other favorite heroes are, because I mean, those are the pictures that you want to bring to life. Taylor, you can continue.
I was just going to say that when we grew up, like I said before, and we grew up in an era without social media. MySpace was a thing in our senior year of high school. Like we dodged all of those bullets by just age. And one thing that I learned when I was very young was that if the person you were yesterday, if you're not disgusted by the person you once were, then you're not growing. Like if you can look back and say, yes, I did that crap. This was me. That sucked. And then you own it, and then you grow from it. Then you're a much better person. I tend to be a very forgiving person of people who own up to their things. And I'm also the kind of person who doesn't buy into the cancel culture and the whole let's light the torches and sharpen the pitchforks because someone said this mean rumor. And I hate that, especially with now we saw the movie The Flash tank, and you see how cancel culture has destroyed this thing. And then I look at like the actual evidence, and I'm like, wow, Ezra only did one thing that these people are accusing him of, and he went to court for it and he owned it. But it's one of those things where once the brand comes out, and once people say, oh, this is who you are, it's really hard to convince people otherwise, even if the evidence is there saying that's not true. So it's definitely a very hard stigma to move on. But
and like I said,
you can.
Sorry, I just want to say it is a double-edged sword. It is a double-edged sword because there is a level of maybe somebody does do something terrible and people find out about it, and there's a public accountability for it. And I think that's a great thing to have. You didn't have that 10 years ago. People were getting away with absolutely disgusting, terrible things and didn't get any consequences for it. And so that's the pro of cancel culture. The negative to cancel culture is when facts are misconstrued and judgments are made on people before you've gotten a fulfilled understanding of what you're really talking about. But again, there are pros and negatives to everything. You got to weigh the pros and cons.
Thank you for talking about this. Thank you for I was not something I was aware of, and I'm sure, unfortunately, this is a the elephant in the room that will follow. I hope that this goes away so that we can do more of these things. In terms of your Spider-Man, does he use web shooters or does he have organic webbing?
Web shooters all day.
Okay. Where do you fall on? Do you see Spider-Man as the spider scientist, or do you see him sort of as the X-Men mutant? I feel like in the 90s they were like, he's kind of more this way, where in the past, in the 60s, he was almost like a Fantastic Four member, where he used this more than anything else.
I like him being a scientist type. I've always been a fan of Spider-Man kind of making do with nothing. So I don't entirely like when he has a lot of technology and everything like that. I like when he's got his web shooters, he's got his costume and his wit and will. So he has to use his brain to get out of situations. I like when he's got to make his web shooters, he's got to make his stuff, the web belt. He doesn't have a lot of money, so he doesn't have a lot of resources, doesn't have access to things. And so he's kind of opposite to Iron Man in that way, and where he doesn't have a whole lot to work with, but that's what makes his action in particular endearing, because he's got to think on his feet. He's got to make use of his surroundings, make use of the environment, and work from there.
It's so funny that you brought up Iron Man, though, because they literally were like, oh, yeah, this Spider-Man doesn't have to worry about any of these problems. Here's all the technology you need to be Spider-Man.
Well, that's why I like No Way Home. I like what they did with him at the end of that. That's what excites me for the next movies.
I'm in that same boat. I was a huge Raimi fan. My gripe with the Raimi movies was that they took out the Gwen story, and then they kind of changed that whole bridge sequence. I was like, oh, that's. I mean, now that we see like Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse, I'm like, Sam Raimi disrupted a canon event. He made it. He made it an issue, but like I always had an issue with that. And then with the Amazing Spider-Mans, I loved how opposite they were. They were very grounded. They were very different. It was the only thing that I thought was funny was that Andrew Garfield's supposed to be this nerd, this science geek, but he's also really good looking. So it's really tricky. Like, okay, so how is he unpopular? I mean, even when he looks like a gross skater kid, he's still really good looking. But it was like, all right, I looked at this. And then my issue with the new movies was that he was essentially Iron Man Jr. until they took it all away. And I was like, yes, Spider-Man now. I do remember one interview with Andrew Garfield when they talked to him before around the time of Amazing Spider-Man 2, when they asked him, like, if you were to join the Avengers, which Avenger would you get along with? And he said that Spider-Man Peter Parker is like the salt of the earth, and he would fundamentally disagree with everything that Iron Man is, and that he would align himself with Captain America because of who they are. And then they literally did the opposite for the next trilogy. And I'm like, wow, Andrew knew what he was doing. I think there was a lot
of studio meddling in that. I think there was a lot of, Iron Man's the face of the MCU. We just got Spider-Man in the MCU. Let's put them together, and I think they tried their best to justify it within their stories. But it's still, I still fundamentally disagree with that approach. But I do think that it had a little bit of studio meddling involved in terms of, this will get the profit, is pairing him with the face of the MCU. That's what will make money.
Yeah. 100%. And with your project, with Spider-Man Lotus. Oh.
He is that face. And I don't know how I don't know when they're going to elevate him. I feel like who else is going to lead an Avengers team, right? Like we're supposed to have an Avengers team. Spider-Man's got to be one of the leaders on that team because I don't know who else is on that team.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It could be Doctor Strange. I think he's probably the most popular out of them all right now. I'm not sure though.
That's still alive, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to get back to your Lotus. We need to get back to your project. I had a car thought the other day, Taylor, and I need to say this now before it leaves my head again. Okay, so the guy who didn't get Superman, the guy from The Great, who is that guy?
Was it the guy from X-Men, right?
Yes, the guy who plays Beast.
You talking Nicholas Hoult?
Nicholas Hoult.
Okay. He's been turned down for Batman. He's been turned down for Superman. He should be Reed Richards. He would be a really good Reed Richards.
I could see that. I could see it.
I could 100% see that.
And if they don't lock this down, he's gonna be the next hero of something. They gotta sign him, but I'm pretty sure he could do it. Because if he's not gonna be in DC, he could really spearhead that because they're gonna use that. They are going to. We need some people. We need some legacy heroes back, everybody. I can't deal with these kids anymore.
Yeah, they got to get someone talented. Yeah, he's got to play some big character. He's a very talented actor. So
I honestly think he's going to end up being the Lex Luthor for the DCU. That's my thought.
That would be great.
I think all the stuff about him being in the contention for Superman was all a red herring because he was. I was told that he was up for Lex Luthor before he was up for Clark. So if he gets Lex
You're
Luthor,
that Kevin Feige. If you don't get him now for Mr. Fantastic, we're gonna lose him because he would be a great Lex Luthor.
He would be.
All right, let's segue back, Taylor. Back to what you were talking about.
Back to what I was talking about. So, with the cast that you brought forward for this movie, you have essentially adapted some of the best parts of Spider-Man Blue with backstory between Mary Jane, with Gwen, with Peter, with Harry. And then you've also got behind the scenes footage where you've shown Green Goblin, you've seen Shocker, you've seen all these things. But the heart of the movie is the crux of what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. You have
Right.
him dealing with the consequences of his actions, him dealing with the loss of someone he loves, and dealing with everything that comes with that responsibility. Spider-Man's, like what you said before, Spider-Man is relatable because he is every one of us. And what makes Spider-Man so unique was that every time in the comics he chose to be selfish, he would then turn back and say, no, I have to do the right thing. And oftentimes when he would be selfish, it would lead to dire consequences. And it's always what made Spider-Man such a unique character, because you have the DC characters, which are the gods among men. These are the heroes that we look up to, the icons, the people that we aspire to be. And then, as you said, Spider-Man is who we are, and that constant struggle of balancing the natural man with the responsibilities of a Superman. So with this story, I see a lot of comments, a lot of people asking, once this is done and once this is all wrapped up, one of the Instagram questions that we actually got was, if this is as successful as it's likely going to be, obviously your Indiegogo campaign went crazy, and it definitely blew up. People want to know if you have plans for more.
I'll say I have a lot of ideas. Naturally, being as big of a fan of Spider-Man as I am, my mind will wander on days. I work at a grocery store down the street, so whenever I'm pushing shopping carts, my mind wanders into potential ideas and plots and everything like that. And I do have, I'll say I have elaborate ideas for if I were to continue the story. Of course I would. The practicality of doing another Spider-Man is up in the air. I don't know. I just don't know how the movie's going to turn out. I don't know what the next 2 or 3 years will look like. And it's impossible to predict where you're going to be. I would love to do another Spider-Man. I mean, like I said, it's been the forefront of my life for however long. It's just the practicality of it. I don't know if it's achievable. And this movie ends in a way where you've got a start and a finish. And if it were to not be continued, you've got a narrative that's contained by itself, one single story.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for having it be a thing that can stand on its own, and the talent of that team. If more comes from it, it'll be from us wanting to see all of that again, and not just being like, hopefully this teaser will do something for you.
Yeah, I tried to make sure.
I always think of some of the worst Hollywood teasers. Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking like what Michael's saying. I always think about some of those movies that end in a way that they're like, you're going to get a sequel, and then it bombs and you don't get a sequel. Like, first thing that comes to mind was Independence Day 2, which the movie was destined to be either a fantastic film or just burn all the way down. And that's what it turned out to be. And then the ending of that movie was like, we're going to take the fight to them. Never got a sequel because people didn't like it. And I always appreciate when people don't build in the back door to force a sequel. If the story is standalone, if the story is good enough, you don't need to plant the seeds to force a sequel. People will show up and they will demand a sequel. So I definitely applaud that decision right off the bat.
Thank you.
Jumanji 2 with Robin Williams. We were promised more. We never got more of it.
The thing is, I feel like when you do a movie, you should have plans for, the characters could go here and here and here and here. You can have different ideas for where they might lead to. And I think like my idea or my vision, I guess, would be, a trilogy of Spider-Man. And you've got a trilogy as an umbrella. You've got a beginning to an end. So the trilogy itself is one umbrella story. But each individual under the umbrella should be its own story, and they all build on top of each other. So like if I did a Spider-Man, trilogy, like I would like to do, which again up in the air. It's kind of you've got 3 movies that are all their own umbrella, but they build on each other, they help each other out, and the themes develop naturally across, so you have a very fulfilled conclusion.
Can they all have flower titles?
I can't say. I do have titles for them if they were to be real.
Okay. Are they all plant related?
Maybe they are.
Okay. I would love for them
Spider-Man
to be plant
Rose,
related.
Spider-Man Dahlia, Spider-Man.
Yeah. Okay.
Marigold,
Spider-Man Dahlia is a great name, but okay, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through some of the questions that you got, because I put let me just drop the brightness. I put the question up saying, hey, people, throw me your questions, and you got a lot of people asking questions. So one of the questions was about the sequel, which we did talk about. We have one here from I'm not going to pronounce this username correctly because usernames aren't meant to be said out loud, but I'm going to try it anyways. Timon Civ 930 says, I'm a young director myself. What advice would you give to people who are a beginner at directing?
I think, well, first of all, please storyboard everything. A big lesson I learned throughout the production, you got to storyboard. Please, God, do your storyboards. They help you so much. But I think more importantly, the thing that I always try to tell people is treat your entire crew with an equal level of respect, because I think the more collaborative you are as a filmmaker, the better product you're going to have. You got to stay confident in your own vision and your own idea of how it's going to go, but you have to allow room for other people to pitch in their concepts and their ideas, because you never know where those ideas could lead to, and it could be better than what you see, because having an ego as a director is just going to lead to a whole lot of problems. It's going to lead to tension. People are going to feel undervalued. So you want to make sure everybody feels respected. There were times where on the CGI shots, I would say, here's what I want, but I want you to, if you have an idea to do your own thing, go for it. Go wild with it. If I like it, then we'll go with it. If I don't like it, then I'll let you know what to change and we can work from there. But I wanted to give a lot of artistic freedom to people, even the actors. I wanted to say, here's what I wrote for you. But if you can keep the through line of what I wrote and you are able to mold the dialogue into something that feels more natural, go for it. And I'm completely cool with it. And so, there was even a scene in the movie that was entirely written by the actresses who play Gwen and MJ. They wrote an entire scene in the movie. I approved it. We shot it. They kind of walked through the whole thing, and it's a great scene in the movie. But I try to give freedom to people while also staying confident and making sure this isn't a train where everybody can throw what they want at it. It's a train where you're heading in one direction, but it could change if it needs to, if that makes sense.
That was very gracious of you to let them who are getting into character to explain to you, like, oh, this scene needs to happen, and then to do that thing. And then also, you have a very direct vision in your head, and you're trying to execute that. And good ideas come from anybody, especially when you're on a set and, everyone's got to shut up and you're watching everyone's watching the one scene, right? Eventually you get good ideas and stuff come up. And I'm happy to hear that you're receptive to those things, because it changes it and it makes everyone take ownership of it.
Yeah. The last thing you want is to be a yes man, or to be surrounded by yes men. I always ask people, please criticize me. Please tell me what I'm doing wrong. If you have a problem with this, please let me know and we can work on it. I'm very open to criticism, and even from the internet. When the script leaked online, scenes from the movie leaked online, I was honestly very open to the feedback I was getting, because I'm like, they might be delivering it maliciously, but there's a level of validity to what they're saying. So I'm going to take that into account and work on it from there. It's like, if you're just disregarding criticism and throwing it out the window, you're not really doing anything productive. You have to listen to other perspectives. Even like a set photographer could have the greatest idea in the world, and if you're an egotistical director and you're just going in a through line, that idea could have never been executed. So you have, and sometimes, you got to swallow your pride and admit other people can have better ideas than you, and be open to that. Because that happened quite a few times in the movie. I'm like, let's do this shot. And they're like, actually, that wouldn't work at all whatsoever. And then I look at it and I'm like, okay, you're right. Let's do it this way. But you got to be open and receptive to that,
Awesome. So some of the other questions that we got, I'm going to jump to another one from user Rockfor, ROCFOUR. He had a multiple part question. How do you approach a story when initially considered plot and direction, and where do you look for inspiration for the story you're telling?
I tend to start with, I think every writer is putting a part of themselves into what they're writing. I spoke with J.M. DeMatteis one time. He's my favorite Spider-Man writer. And he told me that everything you write will be, to some level, autobiographical, even if it's unintentional. Because your entire life's experiences, every lesson that you've learned, everywhere that you've grown, will lead you to telling. It'll be ingrained in the story that you're telling. And so I always start with what have I learned throughout my life? What lessons have I picked up on? What has influenced me the most in terms of how I go about my life? And then how do I put that into a story? And so when I get the themes out, when I get the messages out, when I get the ideas of how is this going to impact people? How is this going to inspire people in any way? How can someone watch this movie, take a moment, and just for a second think about maybe I could be doing something differently in my life, or maybe I feel a little bit more inspired to do something today. And that's the central core of the story. After that is when you figure out what are our characters, what are their conflicts, what are they undergoing, and how do they all tie into the theme and show a different side of the theme, because everything's black and white. I mean, nothing's black and white, sorry. There are two sides to everything, and there's nuance to everything, so you have to explore every avenue of it. And I think every character you have is just a different component and a different perspective of the same central theme. And I learned that from Spider-Man 2, because you have Dr. Octopus, you have Peter Parker, you have Mary Jane, Harry. They're all tying into this central theme of there's a hero in all of us.
You meant Spider-Man TWO, but also Spider-Man TOO.
Right, exactly. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, but Spider-Man 2, I spent such a long time, researching that movie and researching the writers of it more particular. They are the creators of Smallville. And so I went from Spider-Man 2 to Smallville, and I analyzed Smallville, and I look how Lex Luthor represents this theme. Look how Clark Kent represents this side. And every character, in some way, they play into a central theme, and they show a different perspective of it. And when every character is able to get through their conflicts and reach a conclusive solution to what they're going through, that's where you have a really powerful ending where your theme is fully elaborated on, and the audience is hit in the face with it because you've got all these perspectives culminated by the end.
Well, and Spider-Man has such a rich, many of his villains are just that, right? It's not necessarily that they're bad. They're just looking at this through a very extreme lens. Mm-hmm. I would say more so than Batman. Batman villains always feel a little statistics. Like, you're like, oh, you're messed up. I understand why you're messed up, but you're still messed up. Right? Yeah. Like Spider-Man, some of his heroes. And I think that's why Sony is trying to turn them all into, standalone movies. The Kraven story, it's like, okay, that's fine. It looks like a fun Kraven story, but like, I don't know. You need that juxtaposition of Spider-Man to raise him to that level.
Yeah, there's just so much depth to every Spider-Man villain out there. There's never been a Spider-Man villain to me that hasn't had a level of nuance to it. Like, I consider J. Jonah Jameson a Spider-Man villain, quote unquote, because he does have a redemption arc. He becomes a better person by the end, but he does terrible things when he starts in the comics. He creates the Scorpion. He tortures this man to go after Spider-Man. He creates Spider Slayers, but he's got good intentions. But just because he's got good intentions doesn't mean he's a good person. And that's the case for almost every Spider-Man villain out there. Like I was talking about Doc Ock, Spider-Man 2. He's prideful and he believes in this dream of his. He genuinely believes he's going to improve the planet. But he sort of loses sight of, well, why am I creating this renewable energy for the planet? He loses sight of that and becomes so engrossed I don't know how to pronounce it, but engrossed in the ambition, and you lose sight of why you're doing it in the first place. And he flies too close to the sun, and he ends up at the bottom of the sea.
Also, robot snakes were talking to his brain. Like, literally, right? Wasn't the robot like an AI was like, yo, bro, let's do this. He's like, okay. And they're like, yeah.
Well, a misconception that I see a lot that I like to highlight is that Otto was never controlled by them. He was manipulated. So they were, feeding into his greatest desires, but he was still making every choice for himself. The AI was just allowed to influence him, persuade him, but it was still him in control the entire time. And he had to make the choice by the end of the movie to overcome these things trying to manipulate him.
They were the devil on his shoulder, but he still made the choices that they were hinting at. Right. And that was what I always loved about that. Even at the end when he's like, nope, I'm doing it my way. You listen to me. And they're like, okay, sorry, my bad. But they were still very much just like whispering in his ear, like, hey, do this. Hey, do this. Right. Hey, do this. And he was like, I should do that. That's right. That's a good idea.
Yeah. And a lot of people interpret it like it's mind control. But honestly, none of the Raimi trilogy villains are quote unquote mind controlled. Because Green Goblin, that was just another side of Norman Osborn that was being split in half. Doc Ock was being manipulated, not controlled. Even Venom was being influenced by this symbiote, and it was still his own desires. Even Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man 3 might not be the greatest, but it is a very powerful movie thematically. And so the Raimi movies always made sure to make clear that the characters are making their own choices, but they might be influenced by things that are reaching into their maybe unheroic and more selfish desires.
So one of the next questions that came up from CK_D9, what was the process like for developing the Spider-Man suit? Obviously, in this movie, there's multiple suits. You have his year one suit and then his more finalized suit, which honestly, every time I see it, it just looks gorgeous. Like, it looks like a fantastic suit that's almost movie quality. I mean, it is movie quality, but it's also like, I want the movies to do suits of this quality, because we see some really silly stuff sometimes in the movies. So applauding you on the fact that suit looks so damn good.
It was, it was a long process, because I always wanted to see the classic Spider-Man suit brought to screen in a way that was unchanged, felt like just pure Spider-Man. And so my biggest ambition was to take the Romita Spider-Man from the 70s and just modernize him, bring him into a live action movie, unchanged. This is Spider-Man, right? So my initial pitch to the costume designers and the concept artists was, let's maintain Spider-Man for what people know him as. Let's give him the most iconic look that he's known for. And so I was very adamant on even the angle of the eyes. I was like, we need to make it a little bit more squinted. Okay, open it up a little more. Okay, let's get that right there. And then like the spider logo, I wanted them to be the arms to be facing down like the classic Romita. The back spider, I wanted like the classic 70s look. And even the web pattern, we were so particular about. We were like, space it out by this amount. Let's get the texture from the Shazam suit. It would make it look really good. And let's get this muscle shading like that. And we were very particular every step of the way. And the costume designers I was so blown away by their intelligence and their expertise on this, because they've never worked on a movie before. They're Italian costume designers who originally were making costumes for like cosplay, and they'd never made a movie suit before. So for a lot of people who worked on this movie, it was their first time doing everything. The composer of the movie, Caleb, the other composer of the movie, James, they've never composed movies before. They're knowledgeable on music and they know what they're doing, but they've never done a movie before. Warden's never acted in a feature film. Tuin, Sean, Mariah, the entire cast, none of them had ever acted before in a movie. So even the cinematographer, Tristan, he'd never shot a movie in his entire life. He'd shot some B-roll videos, but he'd never, ever, not even a short film he'd ever done. So it was a big roll of the dice for everybody. I'd never directed a movie before, never even written a movie before. So literally almost every single person, maybe the only person who had expertise was maybe like the sound people, and they helped guide us a little bit. But everybody else was like, let's just go for it. Let's just do what we can and figure it out as we go. And so like, I think that's an endearing part about the movie, is that like, none of us really knew what we were doing. We were relying on our gut, and we were like, I think this is what we do. I think maybe. And that inevitably leads to a lot of stress and pressure and like making mistakes and, setting your foot in the wrong direction. But eventually we learned. And at the end of the day, the movie I'm very proud of. It came out really, really nice. And it does feel like a really well-paced movie. And it's I'm very proud of it. But it was a lot of trial and error and learning as we go. And maybe this will work, maybe that'll work. Maybe we should storyboard our shots. But we learned a lot. And I went on a whole tangent that had nothing to do with what you asked me here. I do that a lot. I apologize.
No, don't worry about it. I also want to say your Spider-Man eyes look really good.
Thank you. They're my favorite part.
The eyes look really good.
Yeah, they nailed that. I wanted the Alex Ross type, like under certain angles it can look really menacing, and then in other angles it can look like your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. They're very dynamic looking lenses. They're really cool.
Very cool.
And then so we had a few people that asked multiple questions. I'm going to go through some of the quick ones first. Colson Studio Productions asked, what was the camera rig for most of Lotus's shooting? And P.S. the film looks amazing.
Thank you. So we used a camera called the Zcam E2S6. I had never heard of this camera in my life. I was like, what the hell is even that? But the cinematographer Tristan already had it, and his footage was incredible on it. Warden suggested that we use anamorphic lenses, and I was like, I don't know if I want the Michael Bay lens flare type look. He's like, no, trust me, it will improve the quality 10 times. And I'm like, okay. And we went for the anamorphic lenses, and huge, great choice on Warden's part. He made a great call on that. And then we used an RS2 Ronin gimbal. Again, I'd only ever used the Ronin S, the initial one. I'd never used the RS2. Really, really good. Something kind of embarrassing is for the first month and a half, 2 months of shooting, we didn't know that we could increase the stabilization more on it. So some shots are a lot shakier than they should have been. And, the last 4 days of shooting principal photography were like, dude, we can hit right there. We can stabilize it better. And I'm like, oh, shit. And then it was like, stuff like that you learn as you go. But, yeah, that was our setup. We tried a shoulder rig, and it didn't work out at all. The cinematographer's like, this honestly just makes it worse for me. Let's not do that. But, yeah, and then there were some of it we shot on red. Some of the flashbacks for Ditto Spider-Man, we used a red Komodo, and that was on an RS3. And let me tell you, the RS3 is incredible. Oh my gosh, it's like the most insane thing ever used, with Rokinon lenses. So there were a couple different setups depending on it was a flashback or a part of the story.
Awesome. And so here's a completely different tangent. Mr. Vega Official, he's a CGI artist who does a lot of fantastic work. He wanted to know, did you like Batman versus Superman?
I've had an interesting journey with that because I loved it when it came out. I was in 7th grade, and I came out of the theater like, that was the most epic thing I've ever seen in my life. And then when I got to high school, I was like, oh, Snyder's edgy. Like, this is stupid. Like, this is cringy. And then now I've reached a point where I actually really appreciate the movie for what it did. It's a different approach to like Batman than I am normally agreeable to, because, okay, I'm going to go on a little tangent real quick, but when it comes to the no killing rule, a lot of adaptations say once he kills, he can never come back from it, and he would lose his mind and go psycho. Batman v Superman actually gives it a more optimistic approach. It says if Batman does kill someone, he can find his way back to the light, and he's not completely broken. I've always liked the interpretation of Batman where he is a little bit out of his mind, just slightly. Like the Christian Bale movies, I felt did lean into that a lot, where like there was a hypocrisy to the no killing rule. It wasn't like this moral, there's a morality to it, but there's another side where it's a little bit hypocritical, and I like when that's leaned into. But people misinterpret the Batman v Superman no killing. I think it's a very optimistic take on it, because it does say Batman, even if he does break that rule, he can come back to the light.
Batman kills a guy every 6 months accidentally, okay? Like I think consciously he doesn't plan to kill anybody, but he pushes dudes off buildings all the time. He's got to have some sort of, you roll a slot machine, sometimes you're going to win.
I think that's part of the endearing part of the character is like, in his own mind, if he himself believes he does not kill anybody, then he is mentally stable and he thinks that he's doing the right thing. So that's why I like the Christian Bale. I don't have to kill you, or I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. What? But that's the point. Is that it's so hypocritical. It's like,
I think Zack Snyder said it best, where Batman doesn't murder, but involuntary manslaughter is a thing he participates in all the time. So.
Right. And I like that delved into of like, Batman's a little bit of a hypocrite. And I think that's an interesting part of the character.
He kind of judges people. He's like, yo, if you didn't want to get beat up, why are you dressed as a clown in the middle of the streets at 12:30 a.m.? You're asking to get beat up right now by my fists. Vengeance and justice.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Reeves, I like that Matt Reeves kind of talked about, Batman isn't entirely, he said that Batman's not a hero. I think he said in Twitter, the internet got really mad at that, but I agreed to an extent of like, yeah, there is a level of unheroism to him, because he will beat someone to where they're barely breathing, but he won't cross the line of killing, right?
Isn't that worse to like be
They
paralyzed
put them in the
your
hospital
entire
for
life
6 months.
instead of yeah.
Right. And I think
And
that's
also,
interesting.
yeah, and I also feel like Pattinson's Batman, like especially when you see him all emo boy with his black eye makeup, is like he put that on and then went outside. Like that's an active choice Batman made to look like that.
Yeah, and that's I love the Matt Reeves interpretation because it does say, you know, Bruce is a little bit unhinged. Like this guy is really mentally messed up. And I like that we're gonna go on a journey with him across Matt Reeves' films where he's kind of regaining his sanity because he's starting from a place of I'm just gonna beat the crap out of everybody, but I won't kill anybody. I'm not gonna cross that line because that's something he put in his own head. But I will beat them to near death, and I like that aspect, and I like that Matt Reeves is taking that and creating an actual plot and an actual character arc with that.
Yeah, it's almost like tarot cards. He's not the death card, he's judgment. So he'll
Yeah.
judge you up until the moment death comes and gets you. You know what I mean? Like, nope, this is where I leave it. Now this other guy's got to let you know if you live or die.
Exactly, yeah. And like there's this there's that meme that goes around about like Bruce Wayne could save Gotham's infrastructure with his money, but he goes out and fights crime. And like but people use that as a criticism of the writing when I think that should actually be a plot point of like, yeah, he could be doing that. Why is he going out and just beating everybody up? That is a plot point that can be explored. And I think Matt Reeves is actually delving into that, which is really cool.
And we're gonna get a Robin.
One
right?
thing that I liked about
Robin
both
right
what
around
Matt
the
Reeves
corner?
did, yeah, has to be, what Zack Snyder did was the first time in Batman movies where killing was bad, and let's draw that attention. Let's show right off the bat Superman is now judging Batman for being a murderer, and let's show the redemption of Batman. And then you've got that same lesson being told by Matt Reeves where Batman doesn't give a shit about being Bruce Wayne. He doesn't care. All he wants to do is use his money to fight crime, to deal with his trauma, and his fists are his own catharsis. And then by the end of the movie, he's like, I do have to be something more than what I am. I do have to rise above this. I can't just be vengeance. I have to be more. And we're probably going to see a very different version of Batman in the second one than we saw in the first one because they're telling the same story just from different directions. I thought that was very awesome. So that's why I like certain radical takes because it forces people to have these conversations where they're like, I don't agree with this, but it's not a travesty to the character. It's actually completely in line with the character.
Yeah, I think Ben, like again, there can be. I think Zack Snyder's Batman is a respectable perspective on the character that can be disagreed upon. You know, like you can look at that and say, okay, I understand how that version of Batman how someone could tell a version of Batman and take that from the comics. Here's my interpretation of Batman because Batman's very interpretive. You know, you can agree with things he does or you can disagree with things he does, and still love the character all the same. But I think there should be a line of like, you know, people can disagree and still think this is a respectful take on the character, you know?
Yeah. So the next set of questions, it was a handful of questions, all from this one user. So we'll go through them just one by one. Smoldy, Smoldy, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. First off, is this movie going to release in HDR on YouTube?
HDR? Yeah, I mean, we're uploading it in 4K. So yeah.
Perfect. The next one. Why did you delete the car chase scene? What's going to happen with the shocker if that scene is gone?
That's a comment I got on my Instagram too. I deleted the car chase.
Might be the same guy.
Maybe. I deleted the car chase scene because it was way too ambitious for me. I think I went into it believing it would be a lot easier than it was. But we actually shot it, and I looked at it in post-production and I was like, I don't know how this will be achievable. But the shocker is still in the movie. You know, he still feels naturally entwined. And I think, you know, people will see when the movie comes out that shocker's naturally involved. You know, the car chase was just a little bit above my capability at the moment. But that's why I deleted it.
That's very big of you to understand that and to allow the project to look better by not including it. Sometimes you need to edit things off the plate.
Yeah.
I think people misunderstand that sometimes editing is necessary. Trimming the fat, when you think that the fat's going to bloat the movie, is definitely something that I think people don't realize. We're like, oh, I want every movie to be a director's cut. Throw all the deleted scenes, but people forget that it was deleted for a reason.
Yeah, and I mean, I changed things in the edit. You know, there were lines of dialogue that I removed because they're honestly terrible lines of dialogue. I don't know what I was doing when I wrote them, but I've cut stuff out from the movie that was bad, and I've worked things around. And again, I took people's hate towards me into consideration, and I acted on it. You know, I did honestly pay attention to what people were saying.
So the next question he asked is, could there be any way to get a Blu-ray if you didn't get it during the funding? Because it was obviously a funding tier, and some people now who missed out on the first round want to know if it's possible to get a physical copy.
That's tough because, again, none of the Blu-rays were actually sold. People donated, and then we're going to give them Blu-rays as a thank you for donating. But they didn't purchase a Blu-ray because that would be illegal for me to do. That's kind of a misconception that people have, is like, you know, when you donate, you're donating $50 to the movie. You know, you're not buying something from me. You're donating. And then as a thank you from us, we're giving you this perk, you know, whatever tier you donated at, we're giving to you. So that's kind of the legal gray area of it, is like, we can't profit, but we can accept donations towards this project. And so I don't know if I can do more Blu-rays. There might be some sort of donation thing that I could set up. I'm not entirely sure. So I'd have to get back to them on that.
Heard.
Yeah. I think that's something that people tend to forget a lot about, is that when you are working in the realm of fair use, you're not legally allowed to profit off of anything you make. And the moment you do, it doesn't exist in fair use anymore, and then the studios can sue the crap out of you. And I think people forget that. So when I saw that question, I'm like, I would like to see the diplomatic answer, because I think people don't realize the actual legal answer to it. And then lastly, the last question he asked, is there going to be any way that you'll be releasing deleted scenes, deleted cut content, alternate takes, etc. on YouTube?
Yeah. There are like 3 or 4 alternate versions of this one scene that we shot, because I wasn't satisfied until we got to the last time we shot it. So I'm going to release all like 3 or 4 versions of that. There's some cut content that I plan on releasing, and I want to do like a little director video beforehand to explain why I cut it, why I changed it, just so people understand. And it's not like, well, why would they delete this? You know, I want to give some level of understanding as to why it was cut. But again, I do, and even like, I'm a big movie soundtrack guy, and there are so many alternate tracks from the movie that were changed and modified, and I want to put the entire score to the public, because I'm obsessed with stuff like that. So I want to release like as much cut content as I can.
Here we are. We're coming to the end of this. The home is in sight. When will the world be able to see this? Are we getting that date? Do you know that date? Are we announcing that date?
You got to find out.
We're not allowed to ask that. He's gonna announce it later this week. It's not for us to find out today.
July 8th on my YouTube channel. There we'll announce the release date. The video that I put together is very personal to me. I don't want to say too much about it. You just have to watch it. But I think it's a very important video, and I hope people enjoy it and are kind of as moved as I was making it.
It's going to be on your YouTube. That being said, what is that? I know we'll have it in the descriptions of this video, but just so we're telling it out loud, where can people follow you? What is that YouTube channel? Where can they get the news of all of this dropping?
So my Instagram is Gavin Konop. My Twitter's Gavin Konop. My YouTube's Gavin Konop. But you could just find me under Gavin Konop everywhere, and it'll come up.
What a journey. I'm so excited that your graduation day is coming soon. I am excited to see this project. I hope you get the reception that you are looking for. Whatever that is, I'm so excited that this gets to see the light of day. Not all these projects do, and I can't wait to have you back on for your next project.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys a ton. You have no idea.
All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Like I said, I've been a day one follower of your project. I definitely cannot wait. Now that the home run is in sight, let's see this. I was actually, on a side note, when I saw the first snippets of the CGI make its way online, I was completely blown away that you guys did this. So
They're incredible.
Kudos to you and your team for some amazing work that looks studio quality in some shots. So some shots look better than studio quality. So
all credit goes to them.
They have the eye for CGI.
Yeah,
they have the eye for
talented.
CGI that a lot of industry people miss.
Yeah, they're incredible. I'm so grateful for them.
Kudos to them. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. And Michael, take us home.
That's right, everybody. I am permanently on ending the episode duty. If you'd like to keep the lights on here so we can bring on more wonderful content creators, bringing to light all the stories that we want to see, give us a follow, give us a like, go give us some money over at the patreon.com/theculturednerd. Look at all these wonderful people that keep the lights on around here. Thank you so much for all of your patronage. It is because of you that we're able to do this. Our host, as always, is Taylor Murphy. I am your co-host, Michael Santel. This week, we had the wonderful director Gavin Konop on. Go follow him on all of those things. We're going to see his Spider-Man movie very shortly. In just a couple of days, more news is coming. If you got that cell phone, take it out, scan that QR code right now, like, comment, subscribe. It's a silly thing to say, but it makes other people able to find us. Any questions, concerns, let Taylor know. He's always lurking on those socials. Gavin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Anytime. I'm Michael. That's Taylor. And we'll see all you kids and cats next time.